3 months after the welcome ceremony, Zexara received an urgent message that made her blood run cold. The Krex hegemony had arrived in human space. She rushed to the bridge of the Stellar Harmony where Captain Mordak was already coordinating with Council High Command. The main screen showed dozens of massive Krex warships surrounding human colonies on the outer rim of their system. These were not exploration vessels or diplomatic ships. These were instruments of destruction. The Krex hegemony was older than the Council and far more aggressive. They existed outside all treaties and agreements that kept peace in the galaxy. For centuries, they had swept across star systems like a plague. They saw younger species as either resources to harvest or obstacles to remove. Nothing else mattered to them. War Commander Thakron led the Krex fleet from his massive command ship. Zexara had studied Krex psychology during her training. They were brutal but predictable. They always began with overwhelming displays of force designed to terrify their targets into quick surrender. Most civilized species understood that resistance against such odds was pointless. The attacks began without warning. Krex warships opened fire on human colonies with weapons that turned entire cities to glass. Zexara watched in horror as settlements that had housed millions of people simply vanished in bursts of white light. The Krex were following their standard pattern of total destruction meant to break the spirit of their enemies. Admiral Quindar of the Council Defense Fleet contacted President Morrison within hours of the first attacks. Zexara observed the conversation from her station on the Stellar Harmony. The Admiral offered humanity immediate evacuation assistance and safe passage to refugee worlds far from Krex territory. "We understand the horror you face," Admiral Quindar said with genuine sympathy in his voice. "The Krex have done this to other species. We cannot fight them directly due to ancient treaties, but we can save your people. Our ships are ready to begin evacuations immediately." Zexara expected Morrison to accept gratefully, as every other species had done when faced with impossible odds. The Krex fleet contained over 300 warships while humanity possessed fewer than 40 combat vessels. The mathematics of survival were simple. Morrison's response stunned everyone listening. "We appreciate your offer, Admiral, but we will be staying to fight." The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Admiral Quindar seemed unable to process what he had heard. "President Morrison, I fear you do not understand the situation. The Krex hegemony has never been defeated by a species at your level of development. Resistance will only increase their cruelty toward your people." "We understand perfectly," Morrison replied with a calmness that seemed impossible under the circumstances. "Thank you for the evacuation offer, but our answer remains the same." Zexara began monitoring human communication networks to understand this irrational decision. What she discovered challenged everything she thought she knew about civilized behavior. Defense Secretary Tom Bradley was working around the clock coordinating with General Amy Roberts to mobilize every human military unit. Instead of panic or despair, their meetings showed careful planning and cold determination. They spoke about the Krex attacks with an emotion Zexara had never encountered in any species facing extinction. It was rage, but not the wild, desperate rage of cornered animals. This was something controlled and focused, like a tool shaped for a specific purpose. Dr. Peter Grant had abandoned his peaceful research to develop new weapons systems. His laboratory worked day and night, turning human technology into instruments of war. Ryan Carter led engineering teams that were modifying civilian ships into combat vessels, using techniques that ignored every safety protocol. Most disturbing was the transformation of Ambassador Kate Sullivan. The gracious diplomat who had accepted council membership with such gratitude was now coordinating military strategy with General Roberts. Her entire manner had changed from peaceful negotiator to something predatory. Colonel Lisa Barnes was training civilian populations for guerrilla warfare. Zexara watched in shock as the woman who wrote poetry about peace taught children how to build explosive devices. The contradiction seemed impossible, yet it was happening. When War Commander Thakron issued his final ultimatum, demanding complete surrender within 24 hours, President Morrison's response was broadcast across all frequencies in the system. "You want our worlds," Morrison said with deadly calm. "Come and take them." The statement confused every council representative listening. Zexara ran the words through her behavioral analysis programs, but could find no logical explanation. Humanity was choosing certain destruction over survival. Captain Mordak approached her station as she worked frantically to understand human psychology. Perhaps they are experiencing some form of collective madness, he suggested. The stress of facing the Kreks may have damaged their rational thinking, but Zexara's readings showed the opposite. Human stress responses were not indicating madness or breakdown. They were showing the same enhanced focus she had noted during first contact, but amplified far beyond anything she had measured before. Dr. Grant's team successfully weaponized captured Council defensive technology in ways that violated every principle of its design. Ryan Carter's engineers were reverse engineering Kreks equipment salvaged from previous battles with impossible speed. Their stress was making them more capable, not less. Ambassador Sullivan addressed the Council delegation one final time before communications were cut. "We thank you for your friendship and your offer of sanctuary," she said with perfect diplomatic courtesy. "We ask only that you remember us as we truly were not as victims of circumstances beyond our control." The politeness of her words somehow made them more chilling than any threat could have been. As the deadline approached, Zexara found herself studying human cultural databases, trying to find some explanation for their behavior. What she discovered were thousands of stories about humans who chose to fight impossible battles rather than surrender. Their history was filled with examples of people who died rather than submit to forces they considered evil. This was not madness or irrationality. This was something fundamental to human nature that the Council had never encountered in any other species. The Kreks fleet moved into attack position as the ultimatum expired. War Commander Thakron must have expected quick victory over a demoralized enemy. Instead, he was about to face something that would change his understanding of what it meant to be intelligent life in a dangerous galaxy. Zexara watched the human fleet move to intercept the Kreks armada and realized that her fundamental beliefs about civilization and intelligence were about to be tested in ways she never imagined. Zexara Velnoth pressed her six-fingered hand against the observation deck window as the stellar harmony dropped out of hyperspace. The blue and green world that filled her view looked like countless others she had studied during her long career with the Galactic Council. Her pale violet skin reflected the soft glow of the ship's instruments as she made notes on her data pad. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace across 12 star systems. The secret was simple. All intelligent species followed the same basic patterns as they grew from primitive hunters to advanced civilizations. Violence and aggression were things that smart species left behind when they learned better ways to solve problems. Zexara belonged to the Velthari people who were known throughout the galaxy for their calm thinking and careful study of other life forms. She had spent 200 years watching new species take their first steps into space, and they all did the same things in the same order. First, they built crude rockets, then better ships, then they reached out to see what else was in the dark between stars. The energy readings from this system had been strange enough to send her team to investigate. Long-range sensors showed signs of a species that had just learned to travel faster than light. Their planet orbited a common yellow star, and early scans showed they called themselves humans and their world Earth. Captain Mordak of the Velthari approached her station with his usual quiet steps. His species never hurried and rarely showed emotion, which made them perfect for first contact situations. Too much excitement could frighten new species. "The initial scans are complete," he said in his soft voice. "They appear to follow standard development patterns. Unified planetary government achieved within the last 50 years. Basic space travel mastered. Crude but functional faster than light drive developed within the last decade." Zexara nodded as she reviewed the data streams flowing across her screens. The humans had formed something they called the United Earth Federation under the leadership of a President Jack Morrison. Their first contact protocols were being handled by Ambassador Kate Sullivan, who seemed eager but appropriately cautious about meeting other intelligent life. "Shall we proceed with standard greeting procedures?" asked Captain Mordak. "Yes, but I want to run some behavioral tests first," Zexara replied. Something about their brain chemistry reading seems unusual, but I cannot identify what. Over the next few days, Zexara observed human representatives who came aboard the Stellar Harmony. Dr. Peter Grant was their lead scientist and asked excellent questions about physics and biology. Colonel Lisa Barnes served as their military advisor, but showed more interest in poetry than weapons. Ryan Carter was an engineer who seemed capable of understanding their technology with surprising speed. All the humans passed standard psychological evaluation tests. They showed normal curiosity about other species and appropriate caution about sharing too much information too quickly. Ambassador Sullivan handled negotiations with skill that impressed even the experienced council diplomats. President Morrison himself came aboard on the third day. He was older than most leaders Zexara had encountered, but carried himself with quiet strength. During their formal meeting, he asked thoughtful questions about council history and the responsibilities that came with membership in a galactic community. "We know we have much to learn," Morrison said as he sat across from the council delegation. "Humanity is young compared to your great civilizations. We hope to prove worthy of your guidance and friendship." The words were exactly what Zexara expected to hear. Every species said something similar during first contact. They all recognized their place as newcomers who needed to earn respect through careful behavior and gradual progress. Yet something nagged at her as she continued her observations. The humans' stress response patterns were unlike anything in her database. When faced with difficult questions or challenging situations, most species showed elevated anxiety markers. Humans showed something different. Their stress responses seemed to make them more focused rather than more fearful. Dr. Grant demonstrated this when Zexara asked him to solve a complex engineering problem under time pressure. Instead of becoming nervous, he became intensely concentrated. His heart rate increased, but his thinking became clearer, not confused. Colonel Barnes showed similar patterns when discussing military theory. "Fascinating," Zexara murmured as she reviewed the test results. "Their stress responses appear to enhance performance rather than degrade it." Captain Mordak looked over her shoulder at the data. "Perhaps it is simply a quirk of their evolution. Many species have unusual traits that serve no purpose in modern civilization." Zexara was not convinced, but she had no reason to be concerned. The humans seemed peaceful and eager to learn. Their technology was primitive, but showed promise. Their social structure was stable, and their leaders appeared reasonable. The formal welcome ceremony took place 1 week after first contact. Representatives from all 12 council species gathered to grant humanity junior membership status. Ambassador Sullivan accepted on behalf of her people with grace and obvious gratitude. "The United Earth Federation accepts this honor with humility," she said as she received the ceremonial data crystal containing basic council technologies and knowledge. "We pledge to use these gifts wisely and to prove ourselves worthy of the trust you have placed in us." President Morrison spoke next with words that would have made any council leader proud. "Humanity looks forward to contributing to the peace and prosperity that your great alliance has maintained for so many centuries. We offer our friendship to all people who share the dream of a galaxy united in wisdom and cooperation." Zexara filed her preliminary report that night, with confidence that this contact would follow the standard pattern. Humanity would spend the next several decades learning to use council technology properly. They would gradually adapt their society to match council values. Eventually, they would become full members and take their place as another peaceful civilization among the stars. She recommended that humanity be granted access to basic medical technology and defensive systems. Their aggressive tendencies seemed well controlled, and their leaders showed proper respect for council authority. There was no reason to expect problems. As the Stellar Harmony prepared to leave human space, Zexara took one last look at Earth through her observation window. The blue world looked beautiful and peaceful as it turned slowly in the light of its yellow sun. She wondered if she would ever return to study humanity's progress toward full civilization. She would get her answers sooner than she expected, but not in the way she imagined. The battle began at dawn over Earth's largest moon. Zexara watched from her observation post as War Commander Thakaron deployed his 300 warships in the standard Krex formation, designed to maximize psychological impact. The sight of So many massive vessels bristling with weapons had broken the spirit of countless species before the first shot was fired. Admiral Steve Clark commanded humanity's defense fleet from his flagship. 40 human vessels faced odds that should have made resistance pointless. Yet as Zexara monitored their communications, she heard no fear or desperation in their voices. Instead, she detected something that made her skin crawl with its alien wrongness. The humans were excited. "All ships, this is Admiral Clark," came the voice over their battle network. "Remember what they did to New Sydney and Terra Station. Today we make them pay for every life they took." The response from human captains chilled Zexara to her core. They were not acknowledging orders with grim determination. They were expressing eagerness for battle like predators scenting wounded prey. Captain Luke Henderson commanded a destroyer called the Defiant. As Krek's capital ships opened fire with weapons that could vaporize mountains, he maneuvered his tiny vessel directly into their formation. This was not tactical retreat or defensive positioning. This was an attack run that ignored every principle of civilized warfare. "Target their command ship," Henderson broadcast to his crew. "If we're going out, we're taking as many of these monsters with us as possible." Zexara expected to witness the destruction of Henderson's ship within seconds. Instead, she watched in growing horror as the Defiant accelerated directly toward the Krek's flagship. No sane commander would attempt such a maneuver. The mathematics of survival made it suicide. The Defiant took massive damage as Krek's gunners concentrated fire on the approaching threat. Henderson's ship lost shields, then armor plating, then entire sections of hull. Any rational captain would have pulled back or surrendered before total destruction. Henderson rammed his dying destroyer directly into the engine array of the Krek's command vessel. The explosion lit space like a newborn star. Both ships vanished in the fireball, but the damage to Thakron's flagship crippled their formation's coordination. Henderson had traded his life and the lives of his crew to blind the enemy fleet. Zexara's analysis programs could not process what she had witnessed. Self-sacrifice for tactical advantage violated every model of intelligent behavior in her database, yet it worked with devastating effectiveness. The pattern repeated across the battle zone as human commanders employed tactics that seemed more like controlled madness than military strategy. They used their ships as weapons in ways that defied all logic except the cold arithmetic of causing maximum damage before death. On Earth's surface, the ground battle defied comprehension even more completely. General Amy Roberts had transformed the planet into something Zexara's people had never imagined. Every citizen had become a potential combatant in a defensive network that treated civilian areas as military assets. When Krek's assault troops landed expecting to face organized army units, they instead encountered Dr. Grant's neighborhood defense networks. Children had been trained to use improvised explosives. Teachers led sabotage missions against enemy supply lines. Elderly civilians served as spotters and coordinators for attacks that came from every direction. Zexara observed a group of human youngsters led by a woman named Linda Murphy successfully destroy a Krek's ammunition depot using nothing but fertilizer and fuel oil. The attack violated every principle of civilized warfare by involving non-combatants in military operations. Yet it eliminated enough enemy supplies to cripple an entire Krek's division. The brutality of human tactics horrified her, but their effectiveness was undeniable. The Krek's had planned for resistance from trained soldiers following predictable patterns. Instead, they faced an entire population that had been weaponized by leaders who understood that survival required abandoning every rule of proper behavior. Ryan. Carter's engineering teams achieved impossibilities that rewrote Zexara's understanding of technological development. They reverse-engineered captured Krek's equipment, not over the decades such work usually required, but within days. More disturbing was how they used this knowledge. Carter personally led a strike team that infiltrated the damaged Krek's command ship. Zexara expected them to plant explosives or sabotage critical systems. Instead, they downloaded the entire Krek's tactical database before fighting their way back to human lines. "Now we know how they think," Carter reported to General Roberts with satisfaction that seemed completely inappropriate for someone who had just committed an act of technological piracy that violated numerous council treaties. The emotional state of humans throughout the battle continued to baffle Zexara's analysis systems. Pilot Joe Martinez laughed as he performed impossible maneuvers that should have torn his ship apart. His joy in combat was audible over communications as he destroyed enemy fighters with techniques that treated physics more like suggestions than laws. Ground Commander Rachel Stone coordinated urban warfare while maintaining casual conversation with her troops as if they were discussing weather rather than life and death struggles. Her emotional readings showed the same enhanced focus Zexara had noted during peaceful first contact, but amplified to levels that should have indicated psychosis. Yet their tactics worked with terrifying efficiency. By the end of the first day, War Commander Thakron faced something unprecedented in hegemony history. His fleet had lost over a third of its ships to an enemy force 1/8 his size. His ground troops controlled no territory, despite landing overwhelming numbers of soldiers. His technological advantages had been neutralized by an enemy that learned faster than should have been possible. As his surviving ships pulled back to regroup, Thakron broadcast a message that Zexara would remember for the rest of her life. "The humans are not like the others," he said, with something that might have been fear in his voice. "They are something else entirely." Zexara realized that her understanding of intelligence and civilization had been shattered by witnessing humanity's response to existential threat. These were not the actions of a primitive species learning to be civilized. These were the actions of something that had chosen to be civilized, despite possessing capabilities that made such choices unnecessary. The battle was far from over, but already it had proved that everything the Council believed about advanced life forms was incomplete at best and completely wrong at worst. In the weeks following Earth's impossible victory, the Galactic Council convened emergency sessions that stretched through day and night cycles. Zexara sat in the Great Assembly Hall, listening to species representatives struggle to understand what humanity had accomplished. Senior Counselor Vithmak of the Ethereal Collective spoke for many when he expressed the fear that haunted every council member. If humans can defeat the Krex hegemony, what does that mean for galactic stability? What does it mean for us? The question hung in the air like poison gas. For 3,000 years, the Council had maintained peace by accepting that some threats were too powerful to challenge directly. The Krex had been one of those threats. Their defeat by a species barely out of its home system changed everything. Zexara requested extended observation privileges to study human society more deeply. She needed to understand how such destructive capability could exist alongside apparent civilization. The Council granted her request with obvious reluctance. They were afraid of what she might discover. She returned to Earth expecting to find a militaristic society drunk on victory and preparing for further conquest. Instead, she found contradictions that made no sense according to any model of intelligent behavior she had studied. Colonel Lisa Barnes had returned to writing poetry about peace and beauty. Her latest work was a moving piece about children playing in gardens, unaware that adults had fought and died to preserve their innocence. Yet this same woman had taught those children to build explosive devices just weeks earlier. "How can you reconcile these two sides of yourself?" Zexara asked during one of their interviews. Barnes looked at her with eyes that held depths of experience no council species had ever developed. "There is no contradiction," she said quietly. "I fight so that there can be peace. I teach violence so that others might never need to learn it. The two are not opposites. They are parts of the same commitment." Dr. Peter Grant presented an even more disturbing puzzle. The man who had designed guerrilla warfare tactics was now working 18-hour days developing medical technology to heal wounded Krex prisoners. His laboratory had become a center for treating enemies who had tried to exterminate his species. "Why? Do you help them?" Zexara asked as she watched Grant perform surgery on a Krex soldier. "They came to destroy everything you love." Grant never paused in his work as he answered, "Because they are injured and I am a doctor. What they did does not change what I am." The contradiction seemed impossible, yet there it was. Humans could switch between deadly efficiency and compassionate healing without any apparent psychological stress. They treated both as natural expressions of the same underlying nature. President Morrison invited Zexara to observe a council session where he addressed representatives from all 12 species. His words challenged every assumption about civilization that the galaxy had accepted for millennia. "You see us as violent because you have forgotten what it means to truly care about something," Morrison said to the assembled delegates. We are not more aggressive than you are. We are just more honest about what we will do to protect what matters to us. Ambassador Kate Sullivan had returned to her diplomatic role as if her transformation into a military coordinator had never occurred. Yet when Zexara asked about the change, Sullivan showed no embarrassment or regret. "You think we became different people during the crisis," Sullivan explained. "But we were always the same people. We just showed you aspects of ourselves that you had not seen before because they were not needed." The speed of human technological advancement after the battle defied every model of scientific progress. Ryan Carter's engineering teams had not just absorbed Krek's technology. They had improved it in ways that made the original designers look primitive. "Necessity does not just breed invention," Carter told Zexara as he demonstrated a defensive system that combined human intuition with alien science. "It breeds evolution. We adapt because we must, and we must because we care about tomorrow." But it was the arrival of a second Krek's fleet that truly shattered Zexara's understanding of human nature. War Commander Velthak brought twice as many ships as his predecessor, seeking revenge for their unprecedented defeat. The Galactic Council prepared to evacuate human space, expecting humanity to request immediate assistance. Instead, they witnessed something that redefined what it meant to be civilized. Admiral Steve Clark's fleet did not wait for the Kreks to attack. They intercepted the enemy formation at the edge of human space and engaged immediately. But this time the humans did not fight defensively. They pursued the retreating Kreks back toward their own territory. "Admiral Clark," came the panicked voice of Council Admiral Quindar over emergency channels. "You are violating the territorial boundaries established by ancient treaty. The Council cannot support aggressive action against hegemony space." Clark's response revealed the fundamental difference between human thinking and Council philosophy. "With respect, Admiral, we are not being aggressive. We are being thorough." Zexara watched human ships systematically destroy Krek's outposts and supply bases across 3 star systems. They were not conquering territory or seeking revenge. They were eliminating the enemy's ability to threaten anyone ever again. General Amy Roberts coordinated ground operations that captured Krek's prisoners and treated them according to standards of care that exceeded what the prisoners had shown to their own troops. Yet she also methodically dismantled every Krek's military installation within striking distance of human space. "We do not seek to rule over them," Roberts explained when questioned by Council observers. "We seek to ensure they cannot rule over anyone else." The siege of Krek's forward bases revealed the true scope of human capability when they chose to use it fully. Ryan Carter's technology had advanced to levels that put human science ahead of some Council species. Dr. Grant's medical research had produced treatments that saved lives on both sides of the conflict, but it was their strategic thinking that proved most alien to Council understanding. Humans did not just defeat enemies, they converted them. Zexara observed the transformation of captured Krek's territories into centers of learning and cooperation. Former military installations became hospitals and schools. Krek civilians who had lived under oppressive military rule for generations suddenly found themselves offered opportunities they had never imagined. "We are not here to destroy you," President Morrison announced in a broadcast to all Krex-controlled worlds. "We are here to offer you a better way to exist." The message was not propaganda or psychological warfare. It was a genuine offer backed by resources and commitment that the Council had never shown to any species. Humans were willing to spend their wealth and energy helping former enemies build better lives. As Zexara compiled her observations, she realized that humanity had accomplished something the Council believed impossible. They had proven that strength and compassion were not mutually exclusive. More than that, they had shown that true strength might require compassion to be meaningful. The implications terrified and inspired her in equal measure. The siege of Thakron Prime changed everything the galaxy thought it understood about civilization. Zexara observed from the Council monitoring station as human forces approached the Krek's capital world with tactics that blurred every line between conquest and liberation. General Amy Roberts led the ground assault while Admiral Steve Clark maintained orbital control. But their approach defied every model of planetary invasion in galactic history. Instead of overwhelming force designed to break enemy resistance, They used precision strikes that targeted only military installations while protecting civilian populations. Ryan Carter's engineering teams worked alongside Dr. Peter Grant's medical divisions to transform captured Krek's military infrastructure. Weapons factories became food distribution centers. Military training compounds were converted into schools and hospitals. The message was clear without words. Surrender and be helped, or resist and be overwhelmed but never destroyed. What disturbed Council observers most was humanity's treatment of Krek civilians caught in the conflict. Rather than the expected revenge for attempted genocide, President Morrison broadcast peace terms that offered full integration into human society. "We are not here to punish you for the crimes of your leaders," Morrison announced to the Krek's population. "We are here to show you that there is a better way to live than under the boot of those who see you as expendable resources." Zara interviewed Krek civilians in human-occupied territories and discovered something that challenged her species' fundamental understanding of conquest and victory. Former war commander Thakran sat in a human detention facility that looked more like a university campus than a prison. "They defeated us completely," he said with confusion rather than hatred in his voice. "Yet they treat our wounded and feed our children. They ask nothing from us except that we consider new possibilities. I do not understand their strategy." The strategy became clear when Ambassador Kate Sullivan addressed the Galactic Council in emergency session. Her words forced every representative to confront assumptions they had held for thousands of years. "You have spent 3 millennia believing that civilization requires the abandonment of strength," Sullivan said to the assembled delegates. "You have confused peace with passivity and advancement with submission. We have shown you that true civilization is not the absence of violence. It is the wisdom to know when violence serves justice." The implications of her statement rippled through the council like earthquake tremors. If humans were correct, then the entire foundation of galactic civilization was built on incomplete understanding. Peace maintained through weakness was not peace at all but merely delayed conflict. Dr. Grant presented the council with humanity's gift to the galaxy. The complete elimination of the Krek's threat achieved not through extermination, but through transformation. Former Krek's territories were becoming centers of cooperation, where warrior culture was being channeled into protective, rather than predatory purposes. "We did not destroy them, because destruction was never the goal," Grant explained to skeptical council scientists. "We neutralized their ability to harm others while preserving their ability to contribute something positive to the galaxy." Zara watched this transformation with growing wonder and terror. Humans had not just defeated the Yoisao, most dangerous military force in known space. They had converted it into something beneficial. The former Krek's hegemony was becoming a federation of worlds dedicated to protecting rather than conquering. Captain Luke Henderson, who had survived his apparent suicide attack, now commanded a mixed fleet of human and former Krek's vessels. The sight of ancient enemies working together under human leadership challenged everything the council thought it knew about the nature of intelligence and cooperation. "How do you trust them after what they tried to do to you?" Zara asked Henderson as she observed joint training exercises between human and Krek's crews. Henderson's answer revealed the depth of human understanding that council species had never developed. "Trust is not about forgetting the past. It is about believing in the possibility of a different future. They have seen what we can do when pushed to extremes. Now they are seeing what we can do when given the chance to build instead of destroy." The final revelation came when Zara realized that humanity had accomplished something no council species had attempted in 3,000 years. They had expanded not through conquest or colonization, but through conversion. Other species were voluntarily joining human space because they wanted the protection and opportunities that came with human citizenship. Ambassador Sullivan explained the difference to a stunned council assembly. "You offer membership to species that have already achieved civilization by your standards. We offer civilization to species that want to achieve something better than what they have. The choice is theirs, but the opportunity is real." As Zara prepared her final report, she struggled to find words that could convey the magnitude of what she had witnessed. Humanity had not just challenged council assumptions about civilization, They had proven those assumptions were incomplete at best and dangerously wrong at worst. The humans had shown that strength without compassion was mere brutality. But they had also proven that compassion without strength was merely wishful thinking. True advancement required both the wisdom to choose peace and the courage to fight for it when necessary. Her request for transfer to human space surprised no one who had followed her research. She wanted to study a species that had shattered her most fundamental beliefs about intelligence progress and the nature of civilization itself. In her final log entry, she wrote words that would influence council policy for generations to come. I came to study a primitive species and discovered that we, the supposedly advanced ones, had much to learn. Humanity has shown us that the choice between peace and strength is false. True advancement requires both the wisdom to choose peace and the courage to defend it when peace is threatened. The story concluded with humanity taking their place, not as junior members of the Galactic Council, but as senior partners whose approach to civilization fundamentally changed how the galaxy understood the relationship between strength, wisdom, and progress. Zexara's final observation was perhaps the most important. They have not just witnessed humanity's fury, they have shown us what it means to be truly civilized in a universe where civilization must be earned and defended rather than simply declared and hoped for. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had seen to that.